I like to have people think about one question I kind of like to start off with when I'm working with people is when we get into the part of like, let's find out what work suits you best. I like asking people, like, if you went to a bookstore, where would you go? Like, what would you read? What would you read that you actually are curious about learning about? Like, what do you enjoy? Because, I mean, I was guilty of this too. When 15 years ago, I was like, I want to read about finance stuff all the time. Like, I didn't really want to read about finance stuff. I just felt like I had to because that was the majority of my life. But there are much more interesting things to me now that I want to read. But it's like really figuring out what you enjoy doing for the purpose of doing it, not thinking about the outcome, not thinking about what that's going to get you.
Hello and welcome to the Vinny Brusco Show podcast, episode number 451. This week's episode, I'm joined by Brian Gallagher. Brian is also known as the Simple Man Guide on Instagram. Several years ago, Brian left his corporate job and decided to pursue a life of freedom, traveling the world, living out of a backpack, the exact opposite of what culture and society tells you to do. Brian started the Simple Man Guide as a coach to help facilitate growth for individuals to leave the corporate world, if that's what you want to do, and pursue a life of freedom. And whatever freedom means to you, maybe freedom isn't traveling the world out of a backpack, but discovering your own version of freedom. Brian and I spoke about a bunch of things, his shift from the corporate world to a life of freedom. What is freedom to him, what that means, and also why corporations and companies can't embrace the individual. We also spoke about the Great Resignation, deep thoughts, and deep conversation. This is the second time Brian and I had to have this conversation. The first one, we had some technological issues, and that's not easy to do, but Brian and I dove into a variety of different topics. So I hope you enjoy episode number 451 with Brian Gallagher, aka the Simple Man Guide.
Hey, this is Brian, aka Simple Man Guide from Instagram, just here with Vinny Brusco talking all things life, and I hope you enjoy the show.
And here we go.
What a picture. Look at those biceps. My goodness, look at those biceps in that picture.
What's up, man? Wait, what is the picture? Oh, I know.
Your default picture, you look fantastic. My goodness.
Dude, I wish I got to get that back.
Isn't that a weird?
Man, I missed that.
You look great there.
Thanks, brother.
Are you one of those people that like you didn't realize how good you looked?
I think there I looked pretty good. I was pretty lean, like the leanest I've ever been.
In hindsight, but when you were in that shape, were you like, I don't look that good, or did you feel that good?
There was still part of me. It was like, I should get a little leaner. Or I should like eat a little more. Like, there's always something, right? I usually go on a feeling. Like I tell my girlfriend, and I'm like, I'm not gonna eat this tonight. Like, I'm not feeling great. And she's like, oh, come on. Like she says something to me in Italian, like vaffanculo or something. And I'm like, well, baby, I don't feel my best.
Right.
And maybe I got to get rid of these fucking pictures because it just makes me feel terrible.
Or it can be very motivating.
Well, like I put one on the background of my phone just so I can like see that. But I think it's almost like, I'm almost like immune to it now, like because of the idea was like, okay, I'm about to eat something shitty. I look at my phone and now I don't even like look at my phone. It's like, man, just eat something shitty and forget it.
Like, I just put the phone down. I'm not put it face down.
So it's just like, I just turn the phone over face down. Yeah. So it's like, I gotta find a new system.
Yeah. I don't know what that system is. If you figure it out, let me know, because
I will for sure.
I was doing CrossFit for a while pretty regularly, and I was in definitely the best shape of my life. And in those moments, people are like, you look great. I'm like, I don't, I felt really good.
Yeah.
But not like, I was like, I gotta lose this. I gotta gain this. I gotta push here. So I wonder, are people ever really fucking happy, Brian?
Satisfied. Right. It's like, I don't know if it's Americans. I don't know if it's just people in general. I can't tell the difference. That's why I'm like learning that kind of stuff as I'm settling down in Europe here. So it's like, I'll get to learn a different kind of mindset. There is definitely not that endless need to be productive here. And I even notice it in my girlfriend, like she's Italian. And it's like, I see it and I'm trying to lose like my squeeze every second of productivity out of my day mindset because I don't really need it. And it's not, I should be enjoying other things.
It depends if you're busy or if you're productive, right? Like there's a difference
Yeah,
there.
for
And
sure.
if you could squeeze like last Tuesday, my last day off, I felt like I went to bed and I literally wrang every drop of water out of the towel of life. Like I was like, there's nothing else I need to do. I have checked all the proverbial boxes and I am good to go to bed. And that was a very fueling feeling carrying me through Wednesday and Thursday and so forth and
Sure.
so on.
But would you like those kind of days every day? Like that's kind of where I'm picturing now. It's like I have a lot of those days where I feel really good about what I've done. And then there's other days where I just want to be like, fuck it. I want to leave my phone at home and I want to go sit in the cafe and just read a book and have nobody bother me and not need to feel productive to like feel like I had a good day. I'm still kind of battling to try to get past that.
I would say for me, yes, because I don't have that every day, right? So
Okay. Yeah.
that's more of a novelty of life
Okay.
than the norm. So for you, who lives a little bit more of a free lifestyle, you
Yeah.
probably are a little bit more adherent to like, I'd like to have days where I'm not saturating life, you
Sure.
know what I mean, squeezing everything out of it. Whereas I'm on the opposite side of that, where
Yeah.
it's like I need that day as
Yeah.
fuel to carry me.
Oh, you got a different setup too, man. It's like any free time you have is like, or free time that you have is taken by things that you want to do, where all of the majority of your time is for your kids and for your family and for your work. So yeah, a little different. I can understand the kind of difference there.
How did you personally shift? Because obviously you help guide and facilitate men to a life of essentially what's freedom, right? Leaving
Yeah.
the corporate grind, and not necessarily corporate, but maybe just the mind shift that comes with the corporate world and shifting it to a life or a mindset of freedom. How did you personally do that, like in your own personal life, and how do you help your clients with that?
It was tough. I mean, that mindset is so ingrained in us. And me definitely included in that, like in all of us. No one's immune to that. I don't feel, especially based on your upbringing. I came from a very blue collar family, middle class. All my family was workers and laborers. So very much that if you're not working, you're not earning kind of thing. So always trying to figure out the next way to work and earn money and looking for different jobs to do. I was pushed to like go to college and like do things. I wanted to be a carpenter. I literally wanted to be a carpenter. I had my uncle made a pretty comfortable living. He said he worked 6 to 7 months a year when there was work around and made pretty good dough. And I was like, that's good for me. I loved wood shop and working with my hands. And it wasn't until I had a friend of mine, his dad was like, oh, what do you want to, or where are you going to go to college? Everyone was preparing for college. And I was like, I'm not going to go. And he's like, you're an idiot. He's like, you're the smartest one of these guys. You should be definitely going to college. And I was like, okay. So I decided to go, and that makes that mindset even stronger. It's like you're everything you're doing through high school and college is geared towards landing this corporate job and kind of staying there, focusing on earning money like your entire life and giving away all of your. This is how I felt about it. Giving away my best years from 25 until whatever the final age is, 60, 65. That to me is like, as I look at that now, right in the middle of that, I'm like, those are totally your best years of your life. And you are spending the majority of your waking hours doing something that you don't necessarily like, or that doesn't light you up, which I find to be the majority with most people. And there are steps that I feel that can help kind of alleviate that feeling and get you out of that mindset. And a lot of it is based on kind of doing things that we feel we have to do. Like a big one that I'm big on. And if you see myself on social media, I am always kind of preaching this. Like, I never bought a house. I'm 41 years old. I never owned a home. And a lot of people will say, oh yeah, you're just paying someone else's mortgage. You're pissing your money away. But I'm like, those are things I don't need. I don't need a house. I like the freedom that comes with not having that and being able to go different places. And the main thing is like the fact that I didn't get tied to a job because I went out and like spent all of the money that I was going to be earning on a house. And that I feel just handcuffs people to a certain earning level, which doesn't then allow them to take a risk on doing something that they like when they come to a point where they did something for money. And when I say they, I mean totally me. did something for money, there comes to a
Right.
point where like you were doing it for money and you realize that like your time is not coming back and you don't want to give that away anymore. So helping people understand that like, hey, you don't have to do all these things the way everyone else did them or does them. Figure out what works best for you. So helping people understand what they really want. Now, if they want to buy a house and they want to do all that stuff, I'm all for helping them get there. So as much as I say, like you leave the corporate grind and do all this stuff and leave that corporate world, I'm like, my program is more geared towards helping you figure out what your free life is. Traveling all around the world may not be for you. It doesn't have to be. Again, that's doing something that someone else is doing, but it's really helping you figure out what you want to do. And if that's not working your corporate job, great, we can find a way to get there. If that is working a corporate job and just maybe having some more time to do other things, maybe it's just kind of reshifting priorities, there's a way to do that as well. So just kind of helping people reshift what it is they're driving towards and why they are driving towards that, and making sure it's something that they really want, not something that has been beaten into their heads since they were 14. And that's what I try to help people kind of understand. That was a really long-winded answer to get you there, but that's going back to like, it really starts, I feel, in high school. So that's just kind of gives a sense of the how deep this programming runs, how much it's just a part of the way we view the world and our lives. And I don't think it has to be that way.
Yeah, and it kind of stems back to your roots too, and your parents' roots, where they came from, their upbringing. What was that like? And you mentioned the best years of your life being high school. Do you mean that in a sense of like physically, mentally? Because there's a lot of growth and development, or college rather, to reference it correctly. But do you find that to be like in a physical form, or is it just like, because I feel like there's a developmental structure that's there that still can be very beneficial to you, like your growth?
Yeah, no. I didn't mean best years were in college. I meant best years were like from 25 to 60. I mean, college was fun, but they were definitely not my best years physically. I was soft piece of shit who ate pizza and drank beer all the time.
Right.
I think I was my heaviest weight. I think my senior year of college. I'm 5'8", so I'm not super tall. I'm not tall at all. I hit just shy of 300 or 200 pounds. I was like, no way can I do that and like live a healthy life doing that. So I was on vacation with my parents and my brother. And I remember looking at pictures and I was smiling and I had like the three like chins, and I'm like, holy shit, I got to do something about it. So yeah, college was fun, but it was not my best physical time and not your best. Like there is so much developmental stuff that comes after that. I mean, yes, it's fun and you do learn a lot about yourself, but I feel, and this is a question for you too. Like I feel my most developmental times were probably, I would say 28 to 36, 37, where like a lot of change happened there. And like, if I look back through that, like 8 to 10 year period, I became a completely different person. So for me, that period where like late to mid 20s, early 30s was much more kind of developmental, and like a lot of change happened in that time. I don't know how you feel about that for you. What do you think it was for you? What time period, like in the college years or in once you hit adulthood?
I would say 30. Yeah, 30. Yeah. I'm 38. So 30 to 38 has been a roller coaster, to say the least, right? Just
how old are you? I'm sorry, Ben. How old are you?
38.
38. Okay.
So mentally, spiritually, physically, it's been a roller coaster, right? You really start to know who you are, what you like, things that put you in flow state, things that you want to, strive for. Like at the college years, obviously, are great for developmental reasons of learning a bit of who you are. But again, it's within this structure that is somewhat force-fed, right? Like when people, we don't, in our culture, we certainly don't acknowledge and push people to go to trade schools anymore. It's just like college. And, that separation, like you were like, I want to be a carpenter. Do you regret not going down that route a little bit? Or do you think that college was...
I don't, but I do. There are things that I wonder about. Like, so for instance, like to answer that question, like, I don't wish that I went that route because I have family that has gone that route and now they're in their 50s and 60s and they get pretty beat up, like their hands, their joints, like it's pretty hard living for a long number of years. And even though they enjoyed it and I may have enjoyed it as well, I want to be able to like conserve my body as best I can. Like, and when I see guys like working outside in the winter, I'm like, man, I'm glad I didn't take that route. But it doesn't mean that maybe I wouldn't have enjoyed it. And I also think it gives it, the other thing that I question that is sort of along these lines of like pursuing things that you really enjoy for the actual act of enjoying them, not necessarily doing it for money. Like if I was running like some kind of woodworking business where I was making products that I actually enjoyed doing, and I was curious, and I was kind of like finding new ways to do things and creative ways to do things, like that stuff is fulfilling. And I wonder, another thing that I wanted to do, I wanted to be a physical therapist because I'm super into working out, super into fitness. And all I kept hearing when I was kind of pursuing that route, which would have required college, which was fine. I was like, all I heard was like, yeah, but you're going to be like.
So you were debating on becoming a carpenter, told, hey, listen, you're the smartest of the group. Go to college. You go to college, right?
Yeah.
And then what's your journey after that? So how did you get into the corporate world? What were you doing? Yeah. And then what was that transition out of the corporate world?
Yep. I majored in finance. I wanted to major in engineering, but as soon as I got to second level physics, I was like, fuck this. I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
So I had no idea what else to major in. My dad was just like, why don't you major in finance? I feel like that's always kind of in demand. I don't think he really knew. Like he wasn't working in a corporate world. He didn't, I think he just kind of like from stuff he reads and
sure.
So I was like, all right, sure. That's fine. And so I majored in finance and I didn't know what I wanted to do with that. I didn't know what I could do with it. But I saw that once I get in that major, everybody wanted to go into investment banking. I had no idea what it was, but it was the highest paid one. So I was like, okay, I want to do this. Super competitive job. Kids from all different schools, the top tier schools in the country want to go there. I did not go to a top tier school. I went to Penn State. So this is like the Ivy League kids that all go there. So it's like a pretty hard field to get into. I didn't get in right out of school. I went into accounting. I was just telling my girlfriend this the other day. I was working, I took an internship or a co-op, like a semester off from school to go work this job at Johnson & Johnson in accounting. I didn't really like it. I kind of knew it wasn't for me early on, but I did okay. And I got invited to interview for a full-time job near the end of my college career. And there was a lot more qualified candidates than me. I think there was probably 80 people interviewing. I think they hired 5 from the company that I was working for. And one of the guys who was interviewing was on our division softball team. And so was I. And I played baseball in high school, so I was pretty good at softball. And I saw him, I walked into the last interview and I was like, oh, okay, this could be pretty good. He asked me a shitload of hard questions. I did pretty well, but I ended up getting hired. And I feel like it was because we had a good rapport because of softball. I was like, I'll take it. So anyway, I did that for 2 years. I got hired full time. I did it for 2 years. And again, knew pretty early on that it wasn't for me. About a year and 8 months into it, a buddy of mine messaged me and he said, hey, this firm that I know is hiring analysts for investment banking. I interviewed for the job. I got it. I left Philadelphia. I moved to New York. I found an apartment. I quit my job all within the span of like 10 days. I ended up working in this investment banking job for 9 years. Super stressful when you first start, like way different than a corporate job in like a big like healthcare company like I was
sure.
in. A lot more stress, a lot faster paced, a lot higher expectations. It was tough for the first couple of years, but I liked it. The money was good. It was like money I've never earned before. And like, I didn't even know it was something that was like possible because of like my upbringing and where I came from and like my family and all my friends. Like my first couple of years there, I was like, holy shit. I mean, this is real. People really do get paid like this. I was like, wow. Okay. I wanted to stay as long as I could. But then after a while, I was like, after I paid up off my debts, I had a bunch of savings. I was kind of being able to do the things I wanted to do. And I just felt like whenever I got paid, it was like, man, I'm giving all this time away, but I don't really need it. All the money's just kind of going into my bank account. Everything is paid off. I mean, I sound like a privileged shithead, but I was like in a pretty nice financial situation because I had paid up off my debts. I was living cheaply in New York City. So after I started to like build a little bit of savings cushion, I was like, wow, okay, I don't really need this paycheck anymore. Like I can survive for a good amount of time without giving all my time away, like literally all of my hours. And about the time I was starting to get really tired of it, a buddy of mine approached me and was like, hey, I got an idea for this fitness studio. Are you interested in working on it with me? And I was like, yes. I was like, this is it.
Unequivocally, yes.
Yes, this is it. This is my out. It's in fitness. Like, thank God, like something that I would really, truly enjoy. It's like, I've always wanted to work for myself and start a business. I just never thought it was really possible within fitness. I was like, what the hell am I going to do? And then this guy came to me and I was like, this is perfect. This is like everything I've wanted in one thing at the right time, at the right market time, where like everything was kind of blowing up fitness studio wise. And everything just made sense. And it made it such an easy decision. 2 reasons. I got fired. So that made it really easy. And the second one was like, the second one was like, I had cushion. I had a financial cushion. I didn't need to go run and find another banking job. I was like, okay, this is kind of what I wanted. Now go do it. They let me go 10 days before I was actually going to quit. I needed to quit because we had to get the studio ready to open up. So I was getting ready to leave my job, but they let me go 10 days before. So that was my transition out. And I look back at that, and it's kind of like what you mentioned earlier, like regret. And it's like, I see my buddies now that are like in their late 30s, early 40s, and like they're COOs and they're CEOs and they're running divisions of large companies. And I'm like, I do get, I would say 2 minutes of like, wow, what if I had done that? What if I had stayed in? What if I would be doing this now, and I would be earning this now, and I would have like a beach house. And I was like, and then I think about it, I'm like, no, I would have had to do the same shit I was doing for another 10 years and do it for another 10 after that. It was like, and then it makes me realize like, okay, no, I can go do whatever I want. I'm happy with my decision. Like, this is the path I chose. And the regret kind of goes away. Like, I've been able to do so many things in the past 10 years that like I would not have been able to do had I stayed in a corporate job.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to that point earlier of, are we ever really happy with what we have?
Sure.
Right?
It's true.
But there is that hierarchy there, that hierarchy of needs, that once certain things get met, you start to kind of think next level.
Yeah.
And you could say, oh, I sound like a spoiled guy right now, but you need to have that, to be in that position in order to think, your basic needs need to be met before you can start thinking in a hierarchical sense. And kind of that, I think a lot of people kind of fall back into that structure and go, well, I'll just get a bigger house and I'll just, eat better food. And I'll just get a better car. And it kind of just, rather than transcending through it, they kind of stay within that system.
Yeah. It's a loop that just keeps you trapped in. And I was just literally just creating an Instagram post that I'm going to share when this podcast's over. It's like, it was about kind of managing my spending. And once I realized that there was things that I was spending on that they didn't really do anything for me in terms of happiness. It was like, and all they really did was kept me in this never ending loop of like, you're unhappy at a job that you're working. You need something to kind of make you happy or make you excited. You buy something or you go somewhere, and then like that feeling wears off, and you got to do it again. And then you got to do it again. And then you went bigger, and then you went better. And then you're always chasing. And it's like, it just keeps you stuck. It just keeps you stuck. And I had to just pick a point where I was like, okay, I'm going to jump off of this thing. And again, like getting let go made it a little easier, but there was still a feeling of like, I could go get another job if I wanted to, but I don't want to. I didn't want to do it again.
Yeah. And that push, right? That push from the universe or whatever you want to call it, that you get fired 10 days before you're about to quit, it can be perceived and kind of pivoted in 2 ways. You can take the route of, holy shit, you start panicking. Yes, I have savings, but do I have enough? And you start to panic mode. Or you could do something like you did and say, all right, well, this could be just the sign from the universe that this is the path I'm meant to go on.
I did take more of that second approach, and it was like the hardest thing. I called my mom and my girlfriend at the time right after I got let go, and they were both kind of panicked for me, and my dad too. Like, how are you going to pay your rent? How are you going to do all this stuff? Like typical like dad stuff, and like not coming from a bad place, just worried about, is he going to have to move home? Like what is he going to do?
Right, pragmatics.
And not that he would have cared. It's just like, okay, but I still think back.
Put away
to
the
that
sex
day.
swing, honey. Ryan's coming home.
No, my parents are not the Fockers. So,
right.
So I still remember that day vividly. And the hardest part of the day was like not smiling as my bosses were telling me they were paying me my bonus from last year. They were giving me 3 months severance. And I'm like, that was even more of a sign. It was like, man, if this would have happened the other way, like who knows how it would have worked out. But like everything kind of lined up. literally everything lined up. There was like nothing that was making me say, don't do this. There was nothing, literally nothing. It's like everything was kind of perfect at that time. And that usually is rare, that everything's going to line up for you, but it just kind of did. And not all at once, things would start to come together as I started to move in that direction. People that I hadn't met before were like wanting to invest and wanting to partner and all this kind of stuff. It's just stuff that you would never have known or expected unless you started down that road.
Yeah, and like I said, a lot of people can interpret that two ways and go two routes with that. But having the wherewithal of the moment, and what's the old expression? When you see the moment, chance already passed, or something of that nature. So
Yeah.
recognizing it in real life time, in real time, and saying, okay, this is setting me up for this next thing, rather than being in an anxious state and being panicked or being worried.
Reactive.
Exactly. You were able to respond and kind of move towards the path that you're on now. So you started it was a CrossFit, correct?
It was similar. No, it wasn't a CrossFit. It was something that we tried to brand ourselves, and we loved it. We had such a good time doing it. We wanted it to be, so in New York City at the time, like there was two paths we could have taken. We could have like tried to make it like this cool, super hip kind of studio. And then we have to kind of act that way. Like, or we could just let the studio and the brand kind of like ooze our personality. We chose the latter. Maybe that's not the best way we should have gone, but we had such a blast running it. It just wasn't earning enough money for us to kind of support both of us. And like my partner wanted to get married and have kids. It was like, there was no way we could have done it in the financial condition the studio was in at that point. It was just it was difficult to get it to a point that was consistently earning revenue. And we had to close it up after we had 3 years in our own space, and we subletted spaces for a year before and after we ran the studio. But yeah, it was a super fun job and work to do, but there was downsides to that too. And I always think of it this way. It was like, corporate to me felt very prison-like. Like I had to wear certain clothes. I had to act a certain way. I had to be a certain place every day. And the fitness studio, even though it was ours, was almost a prison too, but like one that we built ourselves. We had to be in the city. We had to teach the classes. We had to make sure the other guy was going to be around if we were going to take a vacation, because like, if you don't teach classes, you don't earn any money. It's like,
right.
It was very difficult. And it was very much like, didn't set me on that. It was a step in the direction towards like living my free life, as I like to say, but it was definitely a learning experience towards that, not the ultimate like end goal to run like a brick and mortar place like that. It just had me feeling less, almost not less free and not more free, about equally free. I didn't have the same kind of freedom that I had after we closed it.
Right. So you're just in general population rather than solitary confinement.
Yeah, true. I mean, literally, dude, me and my partner, because we were paying so much for rent, we were like, we would only do our work in the studio. So him and I are like sitting on the floor on fucking medicine balls, putting together our plans for the day. It was like, we weren't going to go and like work in an office space. We're like, we're paying 10 grand a month for rent for this place. We're like, let's just fucking sit here.
Yeah. Fuck this. Do you think there's room in the corporate structure and corporations to embrace the individual?
That's a tough one. I mean, in what sense? I mean, is this geared towards like remote, kind of the remote work?
Yeah, I mean that's
thing that we're going through now.
Yeah, that's definitely a part of it. But I also think on embracing the individual for who they are while they're in the workplace. Kind of obviously at such scale it might be difficult, but is there a way to kind of divide that pie and add out slices where people can see and be heard and be seen in a corporate structure for the individual they are, and embrace that more and create happier employees?
Yeah, I mean, I think having the remote setup is a start. I don't know. It's funny. We were just talking, my girlfriend and I were just talking about this. There was a person in her job who announced they wanted to be a they. And that's like something that's a step in that direction, right? Embracing the individual, letting them kind of disengage from the old environment that we would think of. Like, that's not something that would have been thought of 10 years ago, but it is definitely a step in that direction. And I think as long as it works within the goals and the structure and the objectives of the company, like yeah, why not? I think people are going to start pushing for that more and more. I mean, even as we see that within respect to like, I want to work from home and I want to work 2 days a week in the office, like those sort of things, I think people are fighting for now. And I think companies will have to kind of embrace that, because if they don't, there are going to be companies that will. And I think top talent will go to those ones where they can find more fulfilling work, be themselves, be more of an individual, and see and kind of like not be like like a cog in a wheel type thing where everybody does the same thing and has to kind of conform. I think you will start to see more of that. I don't know from personal experience how much that has changed in the workplace, because I've been out for 8 years, and a lot of that stuff that we're seeing now with the kind of cries for remote work and even the hybrid situation, like that's all new to me. Like I could have never asked for any of that stuff.
Yeah, it wouldn't
My
have been a
job,
conversation.
yeah, no, not at the second job I was at. The first job, maybe, because there were, if you think about back to 15 years ago, 10, let's say 10, 4-hour work week came out in like 2008.
Right.
That started getting people at least thinking like, hey, and that part of that book was like, hey, how can you set up a remote work lifestyle for yourself? I mean, that book was 10 years ahead of its time, because that is really what has happened since, especially now, since after COVID. That book really was like helping people figure out ways and actually guiding people to having those conversations with their boss. Hey, what does it look like if I work remotely 2 days a week, and putting in systems in place to kind of test if the productivity is still there. I mean, that was definitely a thing, not as popular, not as mainstream, and definitely not in the industry that I was in my last 9 years in the corporate world. So all that stuff is kind of new to me. So will companies have to embrace that individuality more? I'm sure. I just don't know what ways we'll see it further.
Yeah, because I think a big part of people feeling unfulfilled at work is the fact that, like you said, you have to put on. Now, maybe there's obviously uniforms in place that you have to adhere to, or there's a certain image that you have to uphold, and I get that, and I'm all about it. But there's also, being the individual within the monkey suit, right? And that's where so many people, I feel like they're stifled in their own growth within a corporation, is that they can't be individualized.
They are. I mean, that's the whole point of college and grad school is like to kind of create these obedient machines that are going to just go and do kind of the stuff that they're told within a corporation. I mean, that's my personal view. They teach you to be good employees. Now, again, I'm out of college I'm out of college 20 years.
Come on, man.
So like a lot of things have changed.
You
Fuck,
can be
I feel
both.
old saying that. Holy shit.
An old classmate posted on Facebook like, our senior prom was 21 years ago, wherever it was. I was like, holy shit. I was like, wow.
Crazy, man. I'm out of high school. Fuck, next month will be 24 years.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I mean, stuff has changed drastically in that period. Like I don't know how. I know then it's like, hey, you learn all this stuff. So basically you can just show what you've done on a resume to a company. And here's my transcripts, here's my school. And it's just a way for them to kind of pick who they want. And then you learn all the same stuff and you go into the same jobs, and you are meant to conform and meant to do the work you're told and be obedient. And there's not really that much room for individuality. If you want to be an individual, the thought back when I was in school was like, go be an artist or a musician or something along those creative lines, where we were all discouraged from avoiding those because there was this starving artist mentality and like, but how are you going to make any money doing studying literature? How are you going to make any money being an artist or a graphic designer? Like that's the thought. That was the thought then. It's like there are so many more ways to take those talents and skills now and turn them into something that you can make money with. And online businesses have definitely helped that in the past 15 years. But that was the mentality that I think drove a lot of people towards these jobs. It had to be just, if you're not doing something that's going to get you hired by a large company outside of school or after school, you're kind of wasting your college time and money. Like,
and your life.
Yeah. Like, yeah. what are you going to do? What are you going to do with yourself? Like, I'm going to do something I enjoy and not sit behind a desk in a monkey suit for 10 years. Like, what's the problem?
Yeah. I remember when I was a little kid, my neighbors asked me what I wanted to do when I got older. And I said, nothing. And I didn't mean in this like rebellious sense of like, office space, break the printer. But looking back, I realized I was like, oh, I just realized like I wanted to be myself. Like that's like the child expression of that is just like, I just want to be me and get paid for it in some way, shape, or form.
In some way. And another thing, I think I might have told you this before, but another thing I wanted to be when I was younger, I think I told this. I looked at these guys and thought they had a pretty nice life. Gym teachers in high school. Yes. It was like
I drop off my daughter at school and I see the gym teacher and he's in his BMW. I'm like, that guy's got it figured out, man.
Yeah. And all the gym teachers were like kind of young and cool. A couple of them in my area, they would bartend in the summer down at the beach. So like they would work the school year during the year, they would be teachers and make a decent salary. And then they spend their summers bartending where they probably made just as much money as they made all year teaching in cash. So they were living their best lives, enjoying and having fun, just like dicking around with teenagers in school. Like,
right.
And the gym teachers are always like, I don't know. I felt like they were always funny. They were always kind of cool. They always had like, they weren't like the nerds or the.
It was gym. It was fucking gym class, dude. Like it was dodgeball and sit-ups and rope climbs and just wiffle ball in the yard. Like it was gym. It was great. It was play.
I was like, gym day was my favorite day.
Yes.
I was like, so I could do this every day, Monday through Friday. I could just be gym day. I don't have to deal with all the other classes. I was like, this sounds great.
I'm with you. My wife's a teacher, so her perspective on that world is very different than a gym teacher. My sister-in-law is a gym teacher. She might also disagree with us to some capacity. It's not that easy, especially now.
Sure.
Now it's a lot of like teaching the body, teaching, all the nutrition aspect of things.
Yeah.
Whereas when we were growing up, it was like, here's a ball, go hit each other in the face for an hour. You're like, all right, let's do this.
Yeah. Super easy.
Super easy.
Super easy in the sense that none of them look stressed ever.
I agree. I'm with you.
Never. They were always like the most relaxed, coolest dudes in the school, and it was like everybody thought the gym teachers were cool. I'm like, I want to be that guy. Looks pretty fun.
It looks good to me.
But it was like,
gym teachers, God bless them. So so you transition from the corporate world to your kind of own brick and mortar world, and then how did you kind of take that leap of faith, that salto mortale, as your girlfriend might say, to transition to like a bit more freedom?
Well, once we closed the studio down in 2017, we subletted space so we can still teach classes. But we had this other kind of business we were running associated with the studio. We were running team building events for companies. So basically taking it back to gym class or field day, but for adults, and like a break from the work day. Companies loved it. My partner still runs that aspect of the business. I actually stepped away because once we closed the studio, my interest had waned. I was big into the fitness part. Didn't want to do as much of the events that we were doing. But after we closed the studio, I was already starting to tire of New York. I feel like I was there for a long time. I was like, there's just other things I wanted to see. So I started to get ideas like, wow, now we close the studio. Like, I don't even really have to be in New York anymore. And so I started to toss the idea around of like just leaving New York and traveling a little bit, not really having a set plan. And I found I wanted to do a yoga retreat when I left New York, just to kind of do something relaxing. I found a yoga teacher training that was a month long in November of 2019. And my lease was running out the month before. So literally the day before the training started November 3rd, my lease expired October 31st. I was like, 2 months before that, I was like, this is it. I'm leaving. This is
here it is again.
I'm selling all my stuff. Yeah, I'm selling all my stuff and I'm leaving. That was it. I packed up my apartment on Halloween Day, drove a few boxes home to my parents' house, and 2 days later I was off to Ecuador. And I had a blast. It was such a nice experience to end like 14 years in New York. It was like total opposites in every way, like hustle and bustle of big city, on this little beach in the middle of Ecuador, doing yoga all day, every day for a month. It was really cool. In that time, I had already met my girlfriend a few times. We were messaging and I visited her a few times. So I was already like kind of set on moving somewhere, wherever she was going to be, and I ended up just bouncing in and out of Europe for a couple of years, basically, while we were together. But what I was doing, my main thing that I love to do was just find the best part of whatever town I was in and go work out. I filmed it, I shared it, because all of my followers were still like a lot of fitness related people, because I had gotten them when I was running the studio, my fitness studio. So that's all I was doing for, I don't know, 6 months or a year, just sharing workout content. And people started asking me questions about like where I was and how I was doing this. And like, what are you doing for work? Like, how are you living this lifestyle? Like,
are you a gym teacher?
Yeah. Like, tell us, what are you doing? That's when like the light bulb started to go off. And I was like, okay, I could probably help people figure out a way to kind of do something that they like to enjoy, or like I thought of it, just like get out of the corporate realm. So I started to toy with the idea of like coaching people. And I had a couple people, when I mentioned that, I had a couple people that are like, I'm highly interested. Let me know when you start. Let's do it. So I put together some things over the next couple months. I reached out to people again that were interested. And I was like, okay, I'm ready to go. Like, okay, let's do it. So I had a couple clients right away. And that's when I was like, yeah, I really enjoy this because it's on my own schedule. It's fulfilling as hell. I'm literally working directly with one person at a time, and you can really change like the trajectory of somebody's life, or like help them feel unstuck. A lot of people just feel stuck. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this situation? And it's like, okay, you can literally make a huge impact in one person's life. And that is such a nice feeling. And like getting them to write something back to me and tell me like how something was eye-opening, or how this, like, wow, I never thought of it this way. And like how they're making steps towards doing something that they're actually excited about. It's like such a nice feeling, and something that I just never experienced doing any of the corporate stuff that I did. Now, the fitness studio was super fun, and you can see the effect you have on people and how they started to view working out as something that they had to do, to something that they really couldn't wait to do. That was a lot of fun. That was great too. But this was something different, like working one-on-one with someone over an extended period of time, really getting to know people and kind of figuring out how you can help them change what they're doing and go in a direction that they actually want to go in, was super fulfilling. And it just like, that was it. It was like, okay, I'm going to go full in on this direction and see where it takes me. And I'm still in it. It's like, this is not the last thing I'm going to do. And I'm sure it's not. It'd be great if it is. It'd be great if this just turns into, this is my career for the next 15 years. But I hate putting that kind of pressure on myself and the activity, because I don't think anything has to be viewed that way. It's like you are testing things out. You are doing a series of experiments, and you are trying things. You find what works. And if this doesn't work, then I do something else. But if this does work, I'm all in on giving it a shot. And it's just like every other job I've taken over the past 20 years. It's like, you try it, you find what works, you find what doesn't, you find what you like, you find what you don't ever want to deal with again. And then you kind of just keep reiterating what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I like to think of it as it's just a series of experiments. My career is going to be a series of experiments. It's not going to be one thing that I'm going to dread, or that I'm going to continue doing, even though I know there's something else I want to try. And the whole base of being able to do that is setting yourself up in a position where you are able to have enough money socked away where you allow yourself the ability to go a few months or weeks, whatever it is, with no income, until you can get something started in this new direction that you want to take. And I know that's kind of like contrary to what everything else would have you believe, but like that you need to buy a house, and you need to do all these things, and you need to like almost rely on consumerism to be happy. And like, you always have to be buying things, and you always have to have new things. Like, all that stuff is bullshit. It's all horseshit. Like, none of that stuff really does anything for your happiness on a long-term basis. And the sooner that I realized that, the better off I was. Like, it helps me from spending foolishly, and realizing that the excess money I can keep in my bank account is time, that I don't have to do something I don't want to do. It's to do work that I dislike. And that has been like probably the biggest lesson that I've taken away from this whole experience over the past 15 years.
Yeah, there's a lot in there, right? And I wonder if, do you have to go full tilt, right? Do you have to be all in on this next thing, or is there room for, others, right? You say like, oh, have enough room, have enough money to go full tilt onto what you want to do, but is there room in that to also kind of still stay tethered to the beaches?
I think there is, but I mean, part of the thing too is like, I don't want to, I want to find like one or two things. I want to be like hyper focused on whatever I'm doing and not having too many things going at once. Like, I don't know if that's kind of the direction you were heading with that. Like, does it allow you to do other things at the same time? But it's like, I've kind of enjoyed finding like one thing to put all my energy into and then see how it goes. And then if it doesn't work, go somewhere else. And none of these things have been like, I think another important thing was like, none of these things have been like huge money losing ventures, like
Right.
you're taking small steps. It's not like I'm going to now the fitness studio, we put up, I don't know, call it $50,000-$60,000 of our own money and then raise money from outside people as well. So like, yeah, there's some upfront capital there, but we didn't lose it. I think at the end of the day, when we walked away from the studio, like we maybe were up a few $1,000s. We didn't lose a ton of money. We didn't make a ton of money. It was a 4 or 5 year period where we were a little better than flat. You know what I mean? Like nothing where it was like, I did this and it cost me $500,000 and now I'm dead broke and I got to go do something else. It's like, yeah, you can take steps to minimize that risk, right? Where, yeah, if somebody was like, yeah, if you had to start this next business, you need $200,000 in capital. I'm like, well, maybe that's not what I want to do, because I don't want to be put in a situation where I'm going to feel uncomfortable with money again, because it's one of the worst situations. I mean, it's like when I viewed buying a place in New York City, and this was like, now I'm going back like 12 years or so, or maybe longer. I was out of debt. I had savings. And then when I started looking at buying an apartment, I was like, shit, this is going to require me to deplete my savings by a big amount. It's going to make my living expenses go up 2 or 3 times from what I was paying at the time. And it's like, I'm right back in the same situation that I dreaded. Why am I doing that? Like, why am I doing that? Right. It was like, I just didn't, it's just not something that worked for me. And like, I feel at the time it went against everything that I had known. Like even my dad, it was like, bought a house. We grew up in a pretty bad neighborhood when we were little kids, until I was about 10 or 11. My dad bust his ass. My dad's my fucking hero. He worked his ass off for us, for his kids and his family. And he moved us to a better area. But I know he was stressed with the amount that he bit off, like he had to work his balls off to kind of pay for that. And just the feeling of constantly being in debt, I know was tough. He's not that way now. He feels much better now, but it's like, now he finally feels like, I could breathe.
Yeah. That's a lot, right? And then that builds resentment, that builds stress. The way you interface with your family becomes different, right? You're short tempered. So there's a lot more to it.
There is, but my dad was stressed, I think, but I never knew it. That's why my dad is my hero. Like he's a beast. He worked 2 jobs to pay for part of my college and my brother's. He worked from 8 a.m. till 11 p.m. 4 or 5 times a week, and still went to the gym at 5 a.m. 4 or 5 times a week. Like my hero. No excuses. The guy just worked his balls off. And now he's like now he's able to relax a little more. And he's young. My parents had me super young. So he just turned like 63. And so he's able to now, like, he's got some breathing room. He can relax. He's eyeing up retirement. Like he's ready to kind of let loose a little bit and relax, because he did work his ass off for a lot of years, and he's my hero for that reason. But yeah, that it kind of painted a picture in my head. It was like, that's a difficult path to take. Like that's to be in that situation where you bid off a lot. I mean, he did it for his family, but I've seen other people bite off that because they want a big house. And it's like, that makes no fucking sense to me. Like that makes zero sense. To be like house rich, but cash poor, when you have a choice to do that just because you want a big house. Like, for what reason? Didn't make much sense to me. And that was kind of what I was looking at if I was buying a place in New York. It was like, I'm buying this place for what? I don't really care. Like, who am I doing it for? And the decision to kind of keep myself out of that financial situation where I would have had to been chained to that earning level would have kept me trapped for a lot longer. So if I would have got let go from my job, if I had an apartment that I owned, I would have scrambled. I would have been like, shit, I need to go get another job because I can't afford my place if I don't.
Right.
And then it would have allowed me not to take any risk and try something else.
You mentioned traveling through Europe and kind of, obviously you do a lot of traveling. It's a big part of what you do. What's the major difference between the rest of the world and the US? And, were there any particular places that you visited that really had a good grasp on that work-life balance and culture?
I would say it's probably somewhere between the United States and Italy. So, and what I mean by that is like the US is, and again, you have to understand, I was coming from like the center of the universe in terms of hustle and bustle and productivity. It's like, I wasn't, I wasn't living in a very relaxed area. So like for me to leave New York and then move to a place like Italy and live in like a small beach town in Italy, like where my girlfriend grew up, where I would tell my girlfriend, I'm like, I have to go get this. I need to get something printed. And it was for like when I was trying to get a visa. I was like, I'm going to go get this stuff printed this afternoon at like around 3:00. She's, no, you're not. I was like, what do you mean? No, I'm not. She's like, everything's closed from 1 to 4. Like literally the entire town shuts down and everybody goes home for lunch and everybody sleeps till 4 or 5. And then they go back to work for a couple hours after that. So maybe that's a little too on the far, like we don't work enough type thing. I don't know, but it is a pretty nice lifestyle. And it is pretty fun to see that, like, yeah, you can just sit there and like have a coffee and like enjoy your time. And like, maybe you run a little store, maybe you run a little restaurant and there's more of this mentality to live for now than there is to live for 30 years from now. And I've seen a wide swath of that as traveling around. United States, it's all like, work your balls off now for when you're 65. You're working for the future. On the other end of that, you have like Botswana, like where people are walking an hour to go get 3 gallons of water and everything is for survival for that day, like to get through that day. And then there's somewhere in the middle, like Italy, where it's like, yeah, we're going to work a little bit. We'll have a little extra money saved and we'll take off 3 hours a day in the middle of the day. Like I just there's just a wide spectrum of that. And it's nice to see those changes. It's like not everyone, you don't always have to be working your ass off. You just don't always have to do that. It depends on what you want. I feel for me, if I would have continued on that path, I would have had a lot of regret, especially with having to turn down opportunities. Like I always think of this. It's like, if I said to my buddy who wanted to open the fitness studio, I was like, no, I'm just going to kind of ride this banking thing out and see how it goes. I would have looked back in 5 or 10 years after I know for sure I would have been hating my life. If I had done that for another 10 years, I would have been pretty miserable. Looking back and thinking like, wow, what if I had said yes to him and like wanted to do that studio? Like I didn't want that feeling at all. That was my biggest fear, was just looking back and regretting not trying some of these things. Cause your time's not coming back and there may not be a second time. And I didn't know. At the time I was 30, 33. I had no kids. I wasn't married. It was the time to take the risk. Now, if I didn't say yes to that and like something came my way when I was 50 and I had 2 kids and I had a wife and I had a house, and like, it's a much more difficult gamble to take when you have other people depending on you and you have large financial obligations. It's much harder. And that's what I feel like could lead to lots of regret. And I just didn't want that. I didn't want that at all.
What do you advise people to find what they enjoy, their flow? You mentioned like the discovery aspect, and kind of, I think a lot of that is that we forget to play, right? That's one thing with having children that, reintroduces you to play and discovery, right? And I think a lot of people lose that as they get older. How do you guide people to find what kind of drives them and what they want to be doing?
I like to have people think about one question I kind of like to start off with when I'm working with people is when we get into the part of like, let's find out what work suits you best. I like asking people, like, if you were just if you went to a bookstore, where would you go? Like, what would you read? What would you read that you actually are curious about learning about? Like, what do you enjoy? Because I mean, I was guilty of this too. When 15 years ago, I was like, I want to read about finance stuff all the time. Like I didn't really want to read about finance stuff. I just felt like I had to, because that was the majority of my life. But there are much more interesting things to me now that I want to read. But it's like really figuring out what you enjoy doing for the purpose of doing it, not thinking about the outcome, not thinking about what that's going to get you. Like you want to do a thing. Like, for instance, like I like to play the drums. I was taking drum lessons when I was in New York. I wasn't planning to be like a rock drummer. It was just like, I'm not going to go on tour and make millions of dollars being a rock drummer. I was like, I just fucking enjoyed it. It was like, here's an hour or two, a couple times a week where I can just go listen, learn, play, and do something that like is expanding my mind in a fun way. And trying to help people figure out what those things are for them. And what are the things they like to do purely because they enjoy doing them. And like, they don't think about time. They're not like, I have to do this. And that now I'm 5 minutes in, I'm 10 minutes in. Like, that's what I found myself feeling when I was doing things I didn't want to do. Like, okay, I have to do this for another hour. Like, when is it up? How much time is left? Like when you're doing things that you love, it's like, the time doesn't phase you. You don't feel it. You're not rushed to get through it. And I feel like when we're in a job, particularly that we don't like, we're always waiting for our days to kind of zoom by. Like I was waiting for a Monday to be over so I could get to Friday. I was waiting for the weeks to pass so I could get to my vacation. And you're ultimately waiting for like the years to pass so you can retire and have all those years back again. It's like, what is the thing you want to do that you just want to do because you like it? what are those things? Find out what those things are.
Yeah. And the only way to discover those things is by just kind of, I bought a ukulele and I was like,
my best friend has one.
maybe I like,
so
maybe I like the ukulele. I have no idea. I won't know unless I try it. And trying new things, archery, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which is something that really has found its way into my life. So yeah, it's just kind of about discovering yourself and what puts you in a state where, like you said, time is non-existent.
Yeah. And then doing those things just for the definition of play is like, part of the definition of play is like just doing it for the sake of the activity. There's like no other objective except you're having fun. Like, what are those things you want to do that are you just enjoy doing? That's a hard thing to think of for a lot of people. And sometimes me included. It's like, what do I want to do just to go do it? What are those things anymore? Because I think we get so entrenched in the stuff that we have to do, and we want to get good at it. Like, you want to be good at whatever you're doing for work. So you feel like you have to kind of like me, I had to read about finance. And then there came a point where I was like, I realized that I was never going to be as good as the guys that were like passionate about it and that could read about it on their own, just for their own enjoyment. It was like, that was kind of a telltale sign. I was like, okay, I gotta get out of here because I'm not going to be that good at it. I'm not going to be better than this guy ever.
And do you even want to be?
And do I want to be? Do I want to be? And I was talking about this the other day too. I remember I was on a phone call on Memorial Day weekend. So it's funny that like Memorial Day is like next weekend. This was like when I first started banking. It was probably 15 years ago. I remember going to my girlfriend at the time, her parents' house, and like hanging in the pool and everything. But I had to take my laptop with me because I had a shitload of work to do. And I had conference calls all weekend. And I remember thinking that my boss, who was like the managing director, like the top title in banking, he's on these conference calls with me too. I was like, what am I working towards? Like, I'm going to be this guy when I'm 40, ruining my Memorial Day weekend with conference calls about this client work that I don't really care about now. It's like, I have to find something else. It was like little pieces of experience or moments that I can vividly remember that were like, okay, they're all little clues that you get. And it's like in all little instincts that you get that you're like, this is not your thing. So like, be open to what it is your thing is going to be, because it's going to come and you don't want to pass it by staying and doing something that you don't like.
Yeah. And in that thing and in that discovery of yourself, that waiting time could be, grueling.
It could be, and you never know. I just read this. There's a book that I read a couple of years ago called stay interesting. And the author is Jonathan Goldsmith, and that name probably means nothing to you. But if you know the role he finally got after being in acting for like 30, 40 years, everybody knows who he is. It's the Dos Equis Man. He was an actor for so long, and he finally landed that gig when he was like, I think he was in his 70s. In his 70s. He talks about going to auditions, getting shot down, and like just never really landing a major role that he wanted to do. And then he got this, and it was like, it made his career. Now everybody knows who he is.
Of course. What is the demographic that you usually deal with? You know, what are the majority of your clients?
Majority are guys from probably 30 to 40, 30 to 42. I have worked with women as well, but the majority are guys that are just at a point where they want to do something else. They're just not particularly happy with the path they're on, want to try something else, have been in corporate for a long time, or kind of disenchanted with it, don't want to spend the next 20 years doing the same thing, or even if it's not the same job, just in the same environment, in the same kind of role. Because I mean, yeah, if your job sucks, you go to another job, but if you don't like that environment and like giving control of your time to somebody else, like those feelings are only going to creep back in after you go to another job. So it's people like that just want to try something different and like don't know where to start, just don't know the first step to take. What is the first step?
So besides the bookstore question, is there any other testing that you do, like a Myers-Briggs test, an Ikigai? Is there anything like that where you're able to kind of hone in on the person's particular skill sets and personality?
Sure. So what I like to do is I help them find their intersection, and that's where their skills, their interests, and their experience kind of all intersect. There's usually something around there that you could offer to someone, whether it's you could be a coach, you can teach people how to do it, you can do these things for people. Usually I help them find something related to that intersection. But what I do also with them, just to kind of make sure that there's nothing else that we're kind of leaving out, but I don't put a ton of weight into it, is like a personality test. 16 personalities is the one that I have people do, because it tells there's a career section. Like people with your personality traits tend to succeed in this type of job. But it's almost like to me, it's like a hint of astrology, but with some real data behind it. Like astrology is clearly like, what's your birthday? Okay, you're this. Like, it's not that. Sure. There is some data behind it, but it's like, I wouldn't rely on it 100% to kind of pick your career out. I like to do some other things with people first to figure out what they like, what they're interested in, what has their experience been, and what are things they don't want to do again. Because everyone has those things that they like hated from prior jobs. And like, it's clear to know what those are. List those out. Be clear on what you don't want to. It's just as important.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a good co-star, reading and how I'm feeling that day. I'm a sucker for that, some astrology. Yeah. But and I think there's something to that. But I agree with you that there is that nature of who a person is as an individual, that it doesn't necessarily have to be that job, but what is something like-minded of that ilk that I could kind of lean into.
So that's kind of what I like to do when we get into that section of the coaching. I think it's incredibly helpful for people. I don't think it's something that people spend a lot of time on. I think it's just once you get into a job, and this is how I was like, I was just in the job. I wasn't trying to do anything else. I was just trying to survive in the job. Perfect.
So yeah, I agree. I think that, knowing yourself is kind of the most key part of this, and kind of leaning into who you are and what is the best, or what is the most authentic version of you, despite what society norms and expectations are, right? It's hard to break free of that mold, but at the same time, it's even harder to be within a system and not be able to be yourself. Like I remember asking a coworker of mine who's a good friend of mine, like, how's your soul doing? And he's like, I don't even know how to answer that question.
Well, how would you even answer that? Yeah.
Right.
It's like you have to, it's almost simultaneous learning and unlearning is the way I like to think of it. It's like you have to get rid of all this shit that's kind of been dumped on top of us since a young age, whether it's programming you picked up as a kid or stuff that is told to you, like go to college. Like that's an easy one. Like I must have heard that a million times from the time I was 13 until I was in college. It's like, that's like a thing that's just generally accepted as like you have to do. And unlearning all that stuff is tricky too. And getting people comfortable with the fact that like, you don't have to do everything the way everyone else does. I mean, this is your life. It's basically a game. There's a couple of things you have to do, like obey the law and pay taxes and die. Everything else is pretty much up to you. It's pretty much your call. Are you going to let everyone else tell you what those things are, even though you know deep down you don't like them and you don't want to do them? Or are you going to try to tackle it a different way and do things that you like and take steps towards things that you enjoy and that you're interested in, where you have a natural curiosity and a natural talent?
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is who you are is what the world needs too, right? So that authenticity expression of who you are, people need that. People need you to help guide them through the waters of leaving the corporate structure, and you're able to embody that because of who you are and your experiences, and you're able to share that. And I think that sharing is almost our duty.
Almost our duty, right? It's like I was just reading something recently. It says like you literally have one true like job, and it's like to find what it is you're here for. Like find your true call, find what it is you were meant to do that only you can do. Trying to help people find that intersection is the purpose behind that, because there's always something like you may not be the best at one thing, but if you combine 1, 2, or 3 things that you've done, you might be the only person that combines those things, and then you could be the best at it. So it's like trying to figure out what those things are, and helping people go through the skills they picked up for earlier jobs, things that they are truly interested in, any experiences they might have, or any like knowledge bases or skill sets that they have, really helps people to think about, well, yeah, what is it that I could do, that only I could do, and then I can do well.
Yeah, I think in having, long-term goals, but not being tied to those goals, and allowing kind of the world to unfold in front of you, and taking those paths that usually the end goal does not end up being that, and it's the path towards it is circumvented at best.
Sure. Absolutely right. It's important to like what it is you're doing, to like what it is you're actually doing every day, because half the time I feel like what you want it to be is not what it's going to end up being. And you plan and plan and plan and hope and hope and hope, but then things just turn out differently. And a lot of that is because there's things that are just not in your control. And worrying about those causes a lot of undue stress.
Yeah. Do you do any visualization practice or meditation or anything like that?
I don't do visualization. I haven't really tried it, actually. And it's something that I probably should do. I mean, you hear enough about it where it's like, okay, it kind of piques your interest, and like, does it actually work? Meditation, I was doing religiously for a while. I stopped for a bit, and now I just got back into it, mainly for like, I find that I have like bouts where I let a random thought kind of just run amok in my head, and it's hard to shake. So I was trying to think of ways to like just calm my mind. That was part of my, like, one of my goals is I like came into I try to set like decade goals, like 10 years where I want to be like looking forward. And one of the ones, like, I feel like 30s, I really focused on my body, and 40s, I really wanted to focus on my mind and like figure out ways to get like that pure mental strength. Like nothing's going to slow me down. Nothing's going to stop me. Like determination, grit, calm, being able to control your emotions. And I think meditation is one of those things that does help that. And even if for nothing else, like when else would you take 10 or 15 minutes a day just to kind of do nothing and catch your breath? Like, if you're working a job you don't like, maybe not. I mean, I know in my prior life, it would have been very hard to convince me that I needed to take 15 minutes and do absolutely nothing. I was like, no fucking way. It's a waste of time. But now there is something very calm about it. And I found it to be super simple to get into and be consistent with, as long as you pair it with something else that you're always going to do. Like I pair it with my workouts in the morning. So I wake up at around 6:15, 6:30. I'm out the door by 7 for a workout. And then at the end of that workout, usually around 7:45, I sit on a park bench right near my apartment. I use the Calm meditation app and I get a session in, and I haven't missed a day in almost 3 weeks. So it's like not just randomly leaving it up to chance, like, oh shit, I forgot to meditate today. It's like, no, I'm going to finish up my run. I need to cool down anyway. I'm going to sit there. I'm going to put this in, and I'm not going to go back home until I finish it. It's been great. It's like a little bit of like a habit stack, and you can definitely feel the merits of that. Just starting putting the things together that you do. Cause I love to work out. I don't ever want to miss those. So I know if I tie it to something that I don't want to miss anyway, it's like, there's a really good chance I'll do it.
Yeah, that's the James Clear Atomic Habits, right?
Yeah.
Like put habits in front of habits in front of habits so that you create and stack those habits on top of each other. It's like, I'm always going to work out, so therefore I'm always going to meditate. Like my meditation's in my car before I go into work, 10 minutes. I'm like, going to be going to work,
nice.
going to meditate, you know?
Yeah.
And it also puts you in a better state of mind where you're like, all right, I'm going to interface with this thing potentially from a different perspective. And then, like you said, you don't realize how much of that breath you need to release, right? It just kind of sits in your chest. No matter what you're doing, whether it be working out and living a life like you do or working the corporate structure, whatever it is, there is room, and there's much needed room to have that just 5-10 minutes of just, and you don't realize how much you're holding on until you actually let go of it.
Yeah. I think it's wonderful. And I use do you use an app for it? So I was going back and forth on the apps, the meditation apps, because in my mind, I want to think that it's very counterintuitive to the whole principle of meditation. Like, in my opinion, it's almost more about disconnecting from all that shit than putting something in your ear and just another reason to have your phone in your hand. But I do find the Calm app to be very nice and soothing. And like, there's always a good message in it. And it leaves me with a good thought as I wrap up. Do you use any of these meditation apps?
Yeah, so depending, sometimes I'll use Calm or Headspace, and sometimes I just put on some music. I'm a big fan of sensory deprivation, so I'm kind of able to kind of dial into that frequency of stillness pretty regularly. Doesn't happen all the time, but I'm able to I've experienced to the point where I'm like, okay, I know when I'm there, and I do find it sometimes with guided meditation, it's harder, but at the same time, I also realize I go off on more tangents in my mind, and then all of a sudden they'll be like, hey, come back. You're like, holy shit, I didn't even realize I was over there.
Yeah.
You know, so I do find value in that aspect of things, where if I'm just listening to nothing or just some music, I will go off on those tangents, and it takes a lot longer for me to come back.
Well, I feel like it takes no time to come back. It takes such a long time to even recognize you're on one.
That's a better way to put it. Yes.
It's like, holy shit, I've been thinking about this for 4 minutes. Like, how the fuck did that happen? It's like, you don't even realize how long you've been doing it.
And then my brain just goes off in like spurts, like lunch, and then this, and then I'm like, Tuesday, next week, Wednesday. I'm like, holy shit. And like, before I even know, I'm like, where the fuck, how did I get here? How did I end up here?
Yeah. It's so bizarre, man. Your mind is a really strange, amazing thing. It's just, there's no rhyme or reason to like anything that pops in your head. It's just like, you can't control any of it.
And then you ever get to a point where you don't even, like, you're like, how did I get here? And then you reverse engineer it. And you're like, holy shit, how did I connect all those dots?
Yeah. It was like, wait, I was eating lunch in a car, and wait, my dad had this car when I was a kid, and then he knew this was his favorite. It was like just so bizarre how you. And
he's assigned Cal Ripken Jr. baseball card in the attic. Like, what the fuck?
I was like, how the hell did I get here? It's so weird, man.
It's wild.
Shit, I'll tell you. Yeah. Crazy.
Well put. I know you're strapped for time, so I do want to get in. How can people connect with you? How can people kind of get your services, learn more, and how can they get off of the corporate teat, if you will?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Simple Man Guide, GUID, and my website, simplemanguide.com, where I offer one-on-one coaching, and you'll also find a blog and a bunch of fitness books I wrote in my prior lifetime that are still on there that I enjoy and that I still use for my workouts.
So there you go. Brian, I appreciate you doing this again. Definitely technical issues across the board with the blinking and everything else. But you know what? We got it done. And I really do appreciate you rescheduling with me. And again, the way you show up, man, people need this. This is so important for people's own mental health and wellness. And I just appreciate you doing the work. And you're a great follower. You're super inspirational. Although there are moments where I'm like, comparison is the thief of joy. Remember, comparison is the thief of joy. But
I mean, dude, I do that too.
You're super inspirational, and the work that you do is
Thank you, man.
so important. And thanks for doing this again, brother. I appreciate it, and I look forward to
my man.
future conversations.
Same here, brother. Have a good day.
Take
Thanks
care.
again for inviting me, man. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.